This is episode 25 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Zeona McIntyre. Zeona, welcome to the show. Let's say hi, and then I'll read your bio in. How are you?
I am so great. Thanks for having me. I know this is going to be a good show because we already
I just
had
lost
a
you
lot
for
of
a second already. Come on,
Okay.
Riverside. Okay, wait, are you back? This has been the greatest start to an episode ever. We froze right away.
Really?
Welcome to
Okay.
the show, Zeona. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be here. We already had a great chat beforehand, so I think
Yeah.
it's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, and you, as all podcasts know, podcast hosts know, as we get to your bio shortly, you always start talking and then you have to stop because you're going to waste all the good stuff, and you don't want to waste all the good nuggets in a pre-call. So, listeners, we saved it for you. Zeona has been investing in real estate since 2012. She is the co-host of the Invest2FI podcast with Craig Curelop. Owns 12 properties, could be more by now. Sometimes websites are backed up. And she's also a licensed real estate agent in Colorado. And she is the co-author of the new Bigger Pockets book, 30-Day Stay, about midterm rentals.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to have you. And like I was telling you before, I'm almost completed the book and I'm getting a ton of info out of it. Let's just start on the book. How did you get into midterm rentals? And then we'll go back on your full investor history.
Yeah. So I had already been doing short-term rental for a long time, and it wasn't until COVID that I realized I had to make a big change. So I think in COVID, when all the reservations stopped for short-term rentals, which was just a little while, I think a lot of people left the space. They just said, okay, we're closing up shop. We don't want a bunch of weird people coming through with this potential disease, right? And I just thought, well, I'm an investor. I'm not just going to get rid of these properties. I've got to figure out another way to keep them booked. And so I thought right away, well, I guess I'm going to have to figure out a way to try to do these long term. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But then realized wow, I'm starting to get these longer requests. I would get people coming in that were doing emergency care, nurses, military, people that were quarantining. And so I thought, I think there's a way to capture this market and get people in even without doing tours, because that was the real hurdle. So a lot of my properties are not in state. And yeah, it's really worked out. And I think I'm learning every day a little bit more. So we're going to have a second book, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think you immediately showed off one of the traits that I think is so important for investors. It's the ability to pivot. If you're a good investor, you need to have multiple exit strategies or multiple opportunity strategies in case something happens. And you thought like an investor right away. I have assets. Now I just need to reposition what I do with them. And having the success in short terms kind of probably made it a little easier to midterm. And then I'm guessing you found out wow, midterm is better.
Yeah, basically. I know. Now I'm like, ooh, I want all the midterms. It's
less foot traffic, less clients overall, and probably just a little bit more security because they're going to be there longer.
Yeah. And what I'm learning is you can actually make more money than short-term rentals. And I haven't fully gotten there yet, but we are really, really close. And so I can't wait to be sharing what we know.
Yeah, and don't you think some of the differentiation in terms of the money is you're paying way less cleaning fees if you're only cleaning once a month instead of if you do multiple bookings and you're doing weekends and weeks, you could have 2-3 cleanings a week, and that adds up.
It definitely does. Yeah, even though you think, well, the client's paying for that, but it is coming out of what they will be willing to pay, right? So it's just going to be less anyway. Absolutely.
Yeah. So where did you start your real estate investing career? Was it something that before you were in it, you were kind of looking at for a lot of years that a lot of people do, or did something kind of just turn you right into it?
I think I was looking at it from the sidelines for many, many years. As a child, I always loved homes, and we were pretty poor, I'd say, when I was growing up. And so my parents never owned anything. It wasn't like something that felt within reach. I didn't even understand how you would buy a property. So when I got into real estate, it was really accidental. I was in massage school, and a friend of mine had found out about Airbnb, who was living in New York City, and he started renting out his property, and he kept telling me, oh my gosh, you have to do this. But I'm in Little Boulder, Colorado. It's not the same as New York City, right? But after a year of him talking about it and saying, I made like a full salary, he made $50,000 off of this apartment he didn't own. It really made me think differently. Like, well, at least I could try it. Let me see about a little side hustle. And it ended up turning into my whole career. So you never really know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So was he doing arbitrage to start? I'm trying to remember because I know you talked about this in the book as well. He started with arbitrage. So did you start with arbitrage also?
I did because, again, I was a student. I didn't have much money. I was in $50,000 of student loan debt, but I did have another room. So I had a roommate, and I had furnished the apartment so that I could have her paying more of the rent than me. So I was already house hacking a little without even knowing. But once she decided to move out, I realized, wow, maybe I could just rent this out on Airbnb and see. And if it doesn't work, I'll just get another roommate. There's no harm nor foul. And it worked out so well that I had to go get out another apartment because I was renting her old room, then I was renting my room, and I had no place to live.
Yeah. So you started in this kind of like hack arbitrage mid-range where you were there and you were arbitrage on the other room, but then you just said, this is too good, did it as a full arbitrage, and then went and probably did it in the other place that you got as well.
Yeah. And I think that I move so much slower than some of the people that I see these days. It's just that I have so many years under my belt now. But I see a lot of people that arbitrage and then they get like 20 places. And maybe that's also because you see people on Instagram doing it, right? You know that it can be done. When I started Airbnb in 2012, most people didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Right. So it was really a stretch to try this new thing. And everything I was doing was trial and error. And there were no softwares and no other people to talk to. So, I'm really happy with where it went. But I knew for myself that I didn't want to stay in arbitrage and I wanted to buy as soon as possible because I really thought that was where the money was.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was doing, my sister and I were doing, before Airbnb existed, we were doing it on Vrbo and HomeAway, and tried to figure out the experience that way. But like you said, it's so important. There wasn't a lot of resources. There was no AirDNA, and we were doing it in an area that was summer friendly. So we would make, the most in the summer, and then we would long-term. So we kind of did identify that midterm, long-term half strategy with short-term in the summers, which can work for those type of like summer towns. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was your first purchase as an investment? I know you talked about this in the book, but your journey is really interesting, how you went from one to the next. So where did you start when you started buying and stopped arbitrage?
Yeah. So I had an arbitrage apartment 5 minutes away from the place that I ended up buying. And I love this story because it really gave me what I like to call real estate training wheels. For people that are just uncomfortable or unsure about the numbers, you can really try with an arbitrage property or a property you're already living in, and then get comfortable with what you can make in a year and then go buy something. So I had been renting this place and re-renting it out, arbitraging it for over a year. And so I'd seen the entire seasonality because it is very seasonal. And this property, I was paying $1,100 a month, which I think was including my utilities. But I was making between $1,700 in the slow season and $4,000 in the high season. And so I was really comfortable understanding what those numbers would bring in. And when I went to go buy a property 5 minutes away, it was the same thing. It was a 1-bedroom condo, about the same size, close to the college here. And my mortgage with HOA was only going to be $950. And so right away, I already knew I could probably do $1,700 to $4,000 depending on the month. So it felt really, really safe. Yeah.
Was there something about, I think I remember this, something about the 1-bedroom that you thought was a great starter point, not just from the price point, obviously it's going to be more accessible, but in terms of who's coming in and what you're looking to do with your first unit? Was the 1-bedroom the thing that stood out to you because it was more manageable, or were there other things at play?
I think for me, it was just what I could afford. Right. And I think that's really important for people to see, because I think a lot of people are looking at house hacking strategy where they're trying to get a 5-bedroom house or something, and it feels really intimidating. But you could start with a 1-bedroom. You could start with a studio if you wanted to.
Yeah.
And go from there. So it doesn't make you any less of an investor.
Yeah, I feel like if you just look at the overall scale of investor advice, people kind of ignore condos as the first thing because there's HOA, so they feel like you're losing money. But you have such a
Yeah.
savings on potential repairs that it's like a very, very safe first investment, especially if it's Airbnb friendly,
Yes.
and the people around it are okay. So what type of development was the first one bedroom condo in? Was it like big development, small development, separated
Um,
units?
I'd call it small. It's like a 40 unit building, but it's
Yeah,
all
that's small.
condos real close to each other. But what I love about condos as well is that in the short and medium term space, we are paying for utilities. And so if you're already paying HOA, that includes a lot of your utilities.
Yeah.
So it makes it just really light and easy comparative to a single family home where your utilities could be like $500 a month.
Yeah, and I in the midterm book, you guys talked about a lot the safety aspect of condos and buildings that are together because especially when you're dealing with travel nurses, which is obviously big clientele for midterm, they're coming in late at night. You want to make sure that there's other people around as opposed to just like a one-off in the woods, which can be perfect for like a getaway house type situation. But also it provides like there's other people around, so you know that you're providing like safe harbor for people to come in.
Totally. It's a lot of single women traveling by themselves, and they definitely, safety is huge on that list.
Yeah, so you had the one. How did you start thinking about, I want to do this? Like I really want to do investing as my thing because there's always like a something that happens. It's usually when people see like, wow, I'm making money from this. Why don't I just keep turning it up? What was the light bulb moment for you after that first one?
Well, I loved having two properties. So for about 2 years, I had two properties that I would go between when I was arbitraging. And then when I bought a property, I had another property I was going between as well that was still an arbitrage. And so I think there was just this motivation to try to get to a place where I was really owning everything and not as much arbitrage
Yeah,
because there was this element of insecurity for me about, is somebody one day going to just arbitrarily say, well, I don't want to renew your lease, or I'm gonna do something else, or kick me out, and that would have been just giving over my power to someone else, and I didn't really want to do that. But my next buy actually was out of state, and so this happened from a wedding that I went to. I went and visited a friend in St. Louis for her wedding, and just talking to people at the wedding, I got to find out that their mortgages were really, really cheap, that
right.
Airbnb was legal, that they had friends that had been doing it because that was my job, quote unquote. So that was what I was talking to people about.
Yeah,
And it just made me go, I think I should buy a place here. And it really was that quick. It was just, I think I am the type that maybe jumps in almost too quick. It's worked out well for me, but who knows? But I decided then and there that I would buy a property, and I was back a month later furnishing one. So it happened quick for me.
yeah. I have actually an interesting side question about arbitrage because I think
Yeah.
people kind of know of it. If in the properties that you own now that you were going to do a long-term rental, would you allow somebody to arbitrage your property? Because we always go through this where people are asking our clients to arbitrage. We're usually saying no, but like I wonder
Ooh.
if it's because the time frame has changed, or like as a landlord, would you allow arbitrage?
Yeah, it really just depends on the terms. So if someone was coming to me, I would just negotiate all the perfect terms, but I would want a cut of what they're doing.
Exactly.
Sometimes people will give you just a higher rent, which is fine. When I tell people that to go out and negotiate their arbitrage, I say give them rent increases that are guaranteed, get a long lease because people are afraid of undercharging on rent and then vacancy. So if you're giving
Yeah.
them 3 years, they might be more excited to do that. But there's lots of great things that you can add in. You can say, I'm not going to do any repairs under $250. So they've got to be really autonomous, just all kinds of stuff. But I know that they have to keep that property at a certain standard for it to be successful. And so
Yeah.
that makes me feel great, especially if I can get a cut of the
Yeah.
profits.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's the most important part because or else you could just do it yourself. I mean, you're trying to find the owners who don't want to do it themselves and they're open to arbitrage to get a higher rent and they don't have to worry about it. You're just
Yeah.
worried about the foot traffic or tenant choice on their behalf. So what does your
Yeah.
portfolio look like now? Are you all midterm or short term rentals, or do you have other types of properties now also?
I have long terms as well. So in 2019, just magically, I guess the pricing was still affordable enough that I was able to pick up some new construction in Florida. So I've got 5 units down there and they do really, really well. I can get over 10% when I bought them cash on cash. And I felt like, okay, new construction. That means they're not going to call me for anything, right?
Yeah. What areas of Florida are those in?
They're in Ocala, which is really central Florida,
Yeah.
kind of middle of nowhere. I haven't even seen them. I've owned them now 3 years.
No, if you're going to hedge your bets on an unseen one, new construction's the way to go, right?
Absolutely. But I am so tempted because I love the MTR strategy that I may go test out some of those units.
Yeah.
I just can't help myself.
Yeah. Well, so focusing on MTR for a second, what is the one, like the top thing that you're looking for when you're trying to identify an area where there's going to be excessive midterm rental tenants? And maybe it's changed since the pandemic and it's still changing with travel nurses, but like, what's your criteria in terms of the ideal MTR tenants?
Yeah. So now my idea is that the ideal tenants are insurance clients because they pay so crazy high. But that's hard to say where the most insurance clients going to be, right? Because who knows? I guess an urban market is probably going to increase your ability to have them just because of the population in general. But some things I like to look for, I like to have at least 2 hospitals. I love a like cluster, a complex of hospitals. We've got a bunch. That works out really well. In St. Louis, we had more demand than we could ever fill, even when I had 4 properties running at the same time, medium term. And so, yes, if you're close to a good flow of hospital traffic, that can be great, even if you're not saying those are going to be my only tenants. And they never are. It's never just the only tenant you get. But some other things I like to be near is a university because it does bring in a lot of out of country students, you get special teachers, events and stuff. And then I like tech. So here in Boulder, where I live, Boulder, Colorado, most of my tenants end up being digital nomads or some kind of scientist or somebody working for Google because we have a huge campus here. Yeah. So it ends up not even being nurses. So it's kind of surprising.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think when you talk about hospitals, people often forget about the long-term care aspect. There's a lot of people who are in hospitals for long-term, that those people, families who are coming in, ideal is MTR for them. So when I think hospitals now, I think travel nurses. I like them because they're never home. There's no wear and tear. But I also think in my head, like, boy, it'd be great for people who have to, someone's in the hospital 2, 3, 4 months. It'd be great if they had an easier thing than a hotel. I stopped staying in hotels like 20 years ago for the same reasons we all like Airbnb. I like to have my cereal in the morning. Like, I don't want to have to go out to eat. I want a little kitchen. And I really think like STR and MTR really solved that problem, especially for the things that we're talking about. Those are great. Yeah, great point. So how many different markets are you in now, and how do you choose those markets? I know.
So when I was doing short-term rentals, it was different because I would do maybe a consultation or talk to an investor and hear about a new market and go, well, I'll just look on Redfin and then I'll buy something. And a lot of times that worked out. With MTR, what I'm learning is there's a few tiers. I would call it 3. But the very basic level is just listing on Airbnb and Furnish Finder to get your tenants. But they're not paying as much. And so you are leaving some money on the table out of convenience. Yeah. So the second level is getting into corporate housing. And there's a whole bunch of other sites where that's where the insurance people are looking and whatnot. And your third layer is getting direct to agencies and recruiters. And this is usually in the medical field, but they can be in a lot of different arenas. And that takes a lot more work because you're building relationships and cold calling. But the same is true there, that if you get in with somebody and they know you, they'll send you more and more referrals. And so it behooves you to have your portfolio be really deep in one market or 2 markets, but not all over the place. So I'm moving my stuff around because I am in 4 states and in some states, multiple markets, like here in Colorado, I'm in 3 different markets. So I am now changing it up, but that's the fun, right? We
Yeah,
get to
exactly.
sell some and buy some. I love it.
But that I mean, to me, like real estate, I always think of I'm looking for assets. Like my term for 2023 is going to be asset hunting. And I feel like when you buy assets, you can do this. You're going to trade
Yeah,
assets. I learned it from my dad
totally.
growing up. I was always mad when we would sell a house that he did all this work on. And then he would tell me like I made X amount of money. I'm like, okay, let's go. Like just buy me something. And this sounds great. I have
Yeah,
one strategy I want to run by you because I like this one as
sure.
well because we're both licensed agents. We both have our license with EXP. But so we have so many homeowners now who want to buy, but they can't match the time frame. So to me, MTR and even STR in those markets where we work as agents in is a great extra if it works because people to get their most leverage when they want to buy, they need to buy without a contingency. So they need a landing pad in the middle so that they can sell for the highest and then stay somewhere while they look for a house. They get paid the most and then they have the most leverage to buy. Is that something you've ever thought about? We've been working on it, but where I am, everything is so expensive. It's like, how much am I going to make? I
Yeah.
know it would work, but it's like a big chunk to throw in there.
What I've found a lot of success with is capturing the relocation clients, right? So people that are saying we're going to fly out and check out this area, or we're living here. We got maybe a transfer and we're thinking we're going to buy, but we need a furnished rental to see that we like the job first.
Yeah.
I have been able to convert a lot of those people to clients, and then they buy a house with me after. So I think for a real estate agent, you'd be crazy not to do MTR. Do it in your spare bedroom. I don't know what you need, but definitely it's such a good deal flow for us.
Yeah, you're right. The relo is perfect for it because it's instead of forcing someone to buy because they don't want to get a year lease and lock themselves in a place that they don't really like, you give them a little trial period so they can decide which neighborhood they want to buy in because a lot of relos happen fast with jobs, especially now, like they got to get up and go. That's a great point. Let me grab a couple of our questions here that I sent you before. You had some great answers, so I'd love to go through these with you. Greatest influence in real estate, it was Paula Pant. Why don't you tell me about that? We all always have somebody, like for me, it was my dad because I grew up with it, but I love to hear people's stories about like who the biggest influential person is.
Yeah. So Paula Pant has a blog and a podcast called Afford Anything. She's big in the financial independence space. But when I found her blog, it was kind of what we did before podcasts, everyone. We had a lot of blog reading. But
bunch
when I
of
found
kids going, what's a blog? I don't know what that is.
I know.
Yeah.
She was like 1 year older than me, and she was talking about all these rental properties she had in Atlanta. And I just read it and it seemed so approachable. She was kind of talking about how she got from X to Z, and what she did to buy them and how she ran numbers and all that kind of stuff. And now I know her kind of casually, but when I see her, I'm always like, you were the reason. Like it just made it so easy for me. And then I went and did it. So sometimes you just need to see that someone is out there doing it, doing what you want to accomplish.
I mean, approachable is great because if you look at the book that you guys just finished on 30-Day Stay and How Bigger Pockets books come out, they're extremely approachable. So some people may say they're kind of basic. I find I've never read one and not gotten a ton of information from them, but you can be super approachable because there's like real life stories all through 30-Day Stay saying this is how Zeona did it, this is how Sarah did it, and how a bunch of other investors did it, but all with a little bit of a different twist. So it doesn't feel like you can't have like your own independence in it. I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel as investors, but it's nice to be able to put our own spin on it.
Yeah.
All right. Most important trait for a real estate investor to have. This is a great answer as well. You said an open mind. Explain that because I think other people are focused more on metrics. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. For me, it's all about creativity, right? So it's how can I look at something and figure out a way to make it a deal rather than having it to just be a deal. I think very often people say, oh, well, you can't find any deals on the MLS. I have literally bought all of my deals. I think one deal was off market, over 20 or so deals. So I think that's silly. It's just how are you looking at it? How many lenses, how many tools do you have that you can apply to make it a deal?
Yeah, I love that. And I would go back to something that you said before, that you said sometimes maybe you jump too quickly, but I feel like just in this little time getting to know you, you're jumping quickly, but you have plans and you're going to work it out. You see the
Yeah.
asset and you're like, this is something that I'm going to do. I have a couple different options with. And then, like you said, you're going to immediately change. Pandemic happens, short-term rentals get tough. You pivot to MTR, and then you can always pivot back to STR in some. So
Totally.
this is why we invest in real estate. It's probably why some of the listeners say, this seems like a great idea.
Yeah.
All right. What is wrong with the real estate investing world right now? And this isn't like a negative light on it, but like this is what people want to know. And I think it's hard to kind of wade through what's real and what's not. You said something I'm 100% in on. Too many people measuring their success by doors, cash flow, and net worth instead of quality of life or free time. I love this. Is that how you thought about it early on, and how it was maybe easier for you to accept the journey that way?
Yeah, I was really fortunate that I came in it from the financial independence space. So there's the whole FIRE movement, which is financial independence, retire early. And those people have an idea of getting to enough. It's not about this, ever growing competitive thing. It's really, can I hit my number where I'm sustainable and then I can go off and do whatever I want? And so I really came at it with that angle. And I think maybe that's part of why it grew slower than other people. But I find that it's really valuable for me to continue to come back to this and go, wait a minute, am I getting caught up? Am I comparing myself too much? Is this how I want to be living? So I'm in one of those phases right now. Since the book launched, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, a lot of previous guests have talked about that everyone gets excited about becoming an investor, and then they buy too many properties and they're like, this is way harder than the job that I left to do. Now I have 15 bosses yelling at me all the time on my projects. Is that something that you're thinking, like you're trying to set up systems and stuff so it doesn't become what we all left, to get?
I think the properties are like the easiest thing on my plate. Actually,
you must run a tight ship then.
We've been doing it a long time. Yeah. And I have a really, really great assistant, but it's more just this whole other world of podcasting and digital marketing and courses. And it's just very confusing where to put your energy. And it seems like so many people want your attention. So it's confusing.
I think that's one of the hardest things for new investors in trying to figure out, like, who should I trust? Where's the value in the forums? What can I get for free? Were you someone who was active as on Bigger Pockets before you obviously got involved in the book? But have you been through the forums in the past, like I have, learning a bunch of stuff, meeting people through BP? Because I always did and still do.
Yeah, that's interesting. I find that I get a lot of value from community. So I'm pretty active in going to meetup groups, and now I host one.
Yep.
And I have a group online that I think is really helpful, even though it's national. It's still really cool because there's a lot of people that invest in different markets and they can compare numbers. I think especially with MTR being so new, and I think there's a lot of growth available there. We need other people to say, how's the market looking? What's your occupancy rate? Is there enough demand? Because we don't have the metrics out there yet.
Yeah. So the group you talked about, that's a Facebook group, right?
Yes. It's called Airbnb Investing if people want to check it out. Yeah. And I have spent time in the forums. I kind of go back and forth with BP forums. I like going in there and helping answering questions, but it can be a lot.
It is. It's like a waterfall. Yeah. If you make one good comment, then it comes. And, I remember after the first time I was on the BP podcast, my inbox just went crazy and I was like, oh, it'll be no problem. I'll keep up. And then I was like, I can't keep up. So I have to, go back in and take it 10 at a time. But this goes actually to the next question about one way that we could all collectively make the real estate world better. You started in sharing our wisdom, and obviously that's what we're doing here. But do you find that, like, I think we probably think the same way. I get a lot out of giving value to other people looking to invest because I don't want them to make the mistakes that I see happening, because it's not all pretty. There's lots of courses that maybe aren't going to come through. And I feel like I can be a steward to help guide them through and just give free advice. Will there be paid stuff at some point? I guess, but, buying a book and being able to read the book is a very small price to pay for the value you can get from it.
Yeah, I think there's two attitudes in the real estate world that I see a lot. Most people are incredibly generous. And I really try to be in that place of just being excited for somebody, wanting to help them as much as you can, giving away all the information because it's not rocket science. But occasionally you do see these people that are leading with ego, and they really have this idea that they did something so special that you won't be able to do it like they did. I don't think that's true. Yeah. So generosity.
I found that the louder that someone may be, it's unlikely that they did as much as they're saying. I just kind of like do my thing. I've been doing this for a long time, and I can only, like you said, you can only help so many people because I don't want to make it so wide, but it is tough. And I mean, I think part of doing, writing the book that you guys wrote and being available on your own podcast and, coming on this podcast, we're just here to try to give out the information that will save people. I find there's a lot of yes people in real estate investing, like they just want a yes. And that's scary to me because that's just a bad decision. If you want to just get someone to tell you it's a great idea to buy a bad property, I'm sure you can find somebody along the way.
Especially if they're getting a commission.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think that midterm rentals are a strategy that somebody could get into right away as a brand new investor?
Oh, yeah. I really do.
Yeah,
and I think,
do too.
It's important to figure out a market that's going to work, but there's still a lot of markets that you can buy something right off the MLS and the numbers are great. And so, I think it's a couple more steps than a long-term rental, but long-term rentals, they're almost dead, in my opinion, unless you bought them 10 years ago. I don't know how you can make those numbers work. It's getting harder and harder. Yeah.
Yeah. What's been the hardest transition for you as a real estate investor, I guess, over the last 10 years? What's been like the one part or the one time in there that was the biggest struggle?
I think the hardest thing for me is when I try to do stuff alone. I think I'm realizing more and more that there's so much good information out there. There's so many people ready to help. Like, why, like you're saying, try to reinvent the wheel or figure it all out? It's gotten so much easier now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously tools available and those are super helpful, but I feel like people and another set of eyes can save you from anything, just bringing someone in. I mean, you say when you're doing out of state, you obviously need to rely on another set of eyes at some point, whether it be the agent in the other area or, property manager or somebody who's looking at it. In terms of the out of state, how are you able to make those decisions for others who want to know without going? Because some people are concerned about that.
Yeah, I don't go to see a property until I'm closing. So just so people know that that's possible. But basically, I rely on my agent. So you want to make sure that you trust them and that they have experience in what you're trying to do and that they're willing to do a little bit of extra work because they are your eyes and ears, right?
Yeah.
But I go off of a video. So that's usually how I have them do it. And then I put a lot of weight into the inspection. Right? Because I wouldn't know if I'm there and I flew out and I'm walking around the property. I have no idea what I'm looking at. Right? So it's really about what the inspector is going to turn up. That means a lot to me. So after that, if that all passes, then I feel pretty good about it. And I just fly out for the furnishing part. That's when I meet my house.
I mean, that's the fun part. Are you doing all the furnishings yourself? I know on the original one in St. Louis, you definitely did. Is that part of the fun for you?
I do like that part. Yeah. I am now flying someone out with me is generally how I do it. I have a designer here in Colorado that she does most of our clients and all my properties. I'm realizing more and more as it goes. And I think this is just a transition with the competitiveness that's in the short and medium term space is that you really have to have great furnishings. Yeah. And so when I started, I was a college kid and I just got garage sale furniture, but now you got to up your game. And so I'm a lot more intentional and I know that my eye is only so good. I want to have a real professional out there with me.
Yeah, I feel like the experience aspect is underlooked by people who try to get too many because it's market specific what you're doing, but I feel like you could literally do a short-term or mid-term anywhere. And if you create an experience around it, people will go. I mean, they'll drive up to 4 hours just to go there because it's something in and of itself. And instead of just being like cool place downtown with old furniture, where you can lay your head. people, I think, want more than that now, especially to what you said before. The digital nomad life does not only exist in Bali, it exists all over. People moving around monthly, just trying to check out other places, figure out maybe
Sure.
where they want to stop along the way. So
Yeah, I actually think that's a big trend in Gen Z in general.
For
I
sure.
think the way people live is changing. And so there are more and more people that don't have a permanent home and they do just live full time on Airbnb.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you just look, my son's 21, he doesn't have a driver's license, and a lot of his friends don't have driver's license because they can take Uber, and he takes public transportation into New York City. And I liken that to where we're looking at. Are they going to hustle themselves to get house ownership early when they have a remote job? I mean, doesn't seem like they should, because they can travel, still do their job, and experience all these, nice places and not get bored.
Yeah,
a lot of us
I still think you should own your home, but then travel.
Yeah, sure.
Get that equity, guys.
Yeah, you can Airbnb out your own home and leave, for 6 months. These are
Absolutely.
all great options. So what's next for you? I mean, are you looking to expand your portfolio, or are you just steadily looking to see in different areas what's going to come up?
Yeah, I think twofold. I want to master the corporate rental space because I do think there's a lot more money than a lot of us realize. And then in that, start building my portfolio. Hopefully I can get better at deal flow here in Colorado, but
Yeah.
I really love being in these markets locally, and it's just so expensive that often the numbers don't work great, but we're working on it. Yeah.
Do you find yourself, like, when I'm looking around my areas, I find myself going out farther and farther, and then I'm like, okay, that's too far. There's always a limit to how far I really want it to be away, just so I can have some eyes on it a little bit closer. If it's in that area, if you're way out of state, you already know that it's going to be far.
Yeah, I'm totally open, but I'm trying to be now more in Colorado. We'll see.
Yeah, great. So, Zeona, if you had one piece of advice that you could give new investors who are looking to get into it in whatever fashion, what would be one piece of advice from the last 10 years of your experience that you would give to new investors?
I'm just a huge proponent of house hacking. So however that looks for you, if you have a spare room, rent it out on Airbnb and try it. If you are going to live alone, go buy a property with little down, even if it's something small like a studio, and then find ways to be out of it here and there, which we use pet sitting a lot, but you can go camping or do different stuff and then see if it makes sense to have more properties. But there's just no way to beat that low down payment, low interest rate that you get from owning.
Yeah, I mean, I think for house hackers who are single or just a couple, they should just be looking for those, what I call uneven multis, the one bedroom over 4 instead of the standard 2-1-2-1, because you're losing money on that unless you do, as you say, rent out a room. But if you want your own place, you look for a 3-over-1, and then you're just going to cash flow better. If you can do a 2+1 and live in a basement unit that's legal for the owner, then you're really in good shape. This was an absolute pleasure. If people want to get in touch with you, is the best way through your website?
Yeah, you can reach out on my website, ZeonaMcIntyre.com. And then I'm on a lot of the social medias. So Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook.
Yeah. Do you find that overwhelming as kind of like an investor influencer to kind of hit all the platforms? I find myself thinking, like, I don't want to reproduce the content, but I want to be across all the platforms.
Yeah. I mean, people consume in different ways on different platforms. So even if you're sharing similar stuff across them, I don't think it's that different because it's just different people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, it was a pleasure to meet you. I really love the book, 30 Day Stay. And I hope that we continue to stay in touch.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. This was episode 25 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Zeona McIntyre. See you next week.